million to pay the contractor. The school district then took it to the Supreme Court, which did cost the district $30,000 to go to the Supreme Court. At that time, it was overturned, and then the district won the suit, so to speak, or that they overturned the ruling, and so we did not have to pay an additional. But we're still on the hook for the 2.9 with the subcontractors on a tax anticipation note. And how do you pay that off when we already have a cash flow problem? We operate with a line of credit here at Nebraska City Public Schools. Many districts, almost all districts, have a line of credit, but unfortunately, our line of credit and with our cash flow is needed as a revenue source. And so I have spent some time with Keith Rohr, unfortunately not in person because of the pandemic, but Keith Rohr and I have spent multiple hours talking on the phone. We're in a Zoom meeting every week, and we text message each other all the time. Okay? So I spent some time with Keith Rohr trying to figure out this line of credit thing. Here's what I've learned. Years ago, there were 3 banks in town that were all part of the line of credit with the school district, but the paperwork with the school district only went through 1 bank. And then at this time, I always say, if you know Keith Rohr, you're not surprised that he was able to create that teamwork attitude in this community to get 3 local banks to work together as one in the best interest of the district. But like everything in our world, we think it's progressing and getting better, but not everything, as we all know. But because of financing rules and laws, eventually we had to lock that in with 1 bank. And so in 2016 or 17, that line of credit is $1.75 million at Commercial State Bank. Then, in March of 2019, the district took out an additional $700,000 of line of credit at Commercial State Bank. And then you all look at me and say, why in the world would you do that? And then I have to look at you and say, number 1, why would the board do it? And number 2, why would a bank ever do that? I'm going to remind you, remember the phone call that Kent Bloom got? Your local bank stepped up and supported the school district so that their employees could be paid. Okay? Otherwise, our employees would not have been paid at that time of year. So a pretty bold move by the bank, but it is a burden on the district. Now I will share with you, because of these presentations and working with the community, as I say, our school district wants to be a great customer in this community and all across the state, while still making people compete for our business. And because of that, Commercial State Bank has reduced our interest rate on our line of credit by an entire point, and they've also offered to help us in some other financing that could help the district in the future. Now this is where it gets difficult with the line of credit. So from 15-16 to 16-17, the district had to carry over $560,000 to start the fiscal school year. The following year, 1.75. The following year, 1.245. Now when I go this year right here, the following year, this is the Rex File year. Rex File had to carry over 2.1 million to start the school year. I had to carry over 1.625 to start this school year. Now, people that work with a line of credit on a regular basis, my dad being a former superintendent, when I've shared this information with him, he goes, great job, you're making progress. I do have to share with you though, there are some things that were done by Rex that are not sustainable. There was some money left on the table from reimbursements from the state that he was able to access so that it would save us some money for the next year. Now, what's the rest of the story? We're in the process of moving payday. You see, we pay on September 1. That's our first payment. We get very little revenue on June, July, and August months. We get a large payment September 15th. One of our property tax, as well as our reimbursements and state aid starts to kick in. We're in the process of moving payday to September 20th, and then the 20th of every month. We have to borrow this money to make that September 1 fiscal year. If we can move that to September 20th, we will not have to borrow or carry over as much line of credit. Brenda Wickhorst, our business manager, and I have done some projections. We believe that in 3 years, we can have the line of credit under control if the community will support us. We will use the line of credit the way it's intended to. in those couple of lean months when you have to hit the line of credit just to make a few bills, but then we could reimburse, we could pay it back immediately. And we have some charts to show that. So we're doing those things internally to address those issues. Valuation. Remember when I told you property valuation for Nebraska City Public Schools is pretty low for the number of students and the diverse population that we teach? In 13-14, we had an $800 million valuation. Today it's $960 million. But we all know what has happened. During this time in education, it was easy to make decisions because property valuation was increasing. That generates more revenue to the school district. We all know what has happened to valuations, even though most of us would say, wait a second, that really hasn't happened to mine, right? My house isn't going down. I spent some time with Christina Smallfoot, county assessor. You all know the first question I asked, what's happening to property valuations? She said they're declining. When you're a superintendent of schools, dependent on property valuation to generate revenue for your school district, not what you want to hear. As a personal owner, maybe, so my taxes go down, but as a superintendent, not at all. The good news is, the next word's out of her mouth, slightly. So that was good news, slightly decreasing. So we'll see. That's part of the problem with school finance. We're always waiting. We cannot make predictions out multiple years because we don't know what's going to happen to property valuations for sure. Also during this time, some people remember Old 2nd Avenue as the old superintendent's office or the district office. I would remind you, people forget that we were educating students in that building. That building was not ADA approved. It was not sprinkled. When we tell joking stories, we say it was heated in the summer and cooled in the winter. Okay? And then we've also learned that we don't believe the students were even drinking water out of the fountains anymore. Because we know the staff was not. They couldn't even make coffee with the water in the building. So that building was no longer an option. Also, at that time, if you're familiar with education, our social-emotional needs of our community and the behaviors of young students started to rise. It really became evident about 2011, 12, 13. It really became something that became a community concern, not just a few people in a school. And so we were struggling of what that should look like. Behavior programs, folks, are completely different than anything else that goes on in a school. Those students have a behavior curriculum with academics when they're ready for them. It is not an academic curriculum that also includes behavior. It is purely a behavior curriculum. And when you're teaching that much of a different curriculum and the needs, to meet those needs of those students so that they can also reach excellence, having them in a location for that curriculum is pretty important for all student success. Also at that time, career academies were very popular, and they continue to be very popular. The state even supplied some additional funding if you would start career academies. This school district had a vision to contract students. So our behavior program would attract students from other districts like Auburn and Syracuse and Plattsmouth, and they would come to our behavior program and we would charge tuition. Same way with our career academies, that program would attract students from other places and they could pay tuition to help offset the cost. It is a great vision, unfortunately has not come to fruition. We do have 2 students in our behavior program from another district right now. That's because we've reached out and really tried to recruit, for a lack of a better word, that we want to collaborate and work together. But I'll also share with you, it's hard to predict because about the time we do that, we have 7, 8 other students that need to come to our program that are in our school system, whether they've moved here or what's going on in our school. And so now those 2 students might be taking the seats of somebody that is our own student. So it's hard to plan and predict those programs. Our career academies, I think it's important for you to know that we have a welding academy that our teacher teaches at our high school. We have a construction technology academy that is taught by our teacher, but it's at Pioneer Academy. I think it's important to know that the IT Academy is our teacher at the Academy. The Education Academy, our teacher at the Academy. And we have a Health Academy that's purely through Southeast Community College. it's important for you to know that all of these can take place in our high school with the exception of that one right there. And so that is why we started to pursue the opportunity to sell that property and consolidate it back to the high school so that we can save some money. And so we're in the process of closing that sale and creating more of a collaborative effort with Southeast Community College to continue to provide those opportunities. So it was time for me to apply for this job. First thing I do is I call Bryce Wilson. Bryce Wilson is the Chief Financial Advisor for the Department of Education. Bryce Wilson is also a Palmyra Panther graduate. Go Panthers, okay? My dad was a superintendent of schools at Palmyra while I went through, and he was a superintendent of schools while Bryce went through. Unfortunately, he's a lot younger than me, and I've learned that every day, you know, when I look in the mirror. So I call Bryce. Hey, I need a Panther favor. Should I apply for this job? He goes, Mark, they have 2 loans on the books, but they come off in the next 2 years. It's going to be tough, but after that, you have a chance. He said, I'd go for it. He goes, there's good people down there. So I get the job. When I signed my contract, and I always jokingly say with blood, then I found out the truth. Rex brought me in and told me, yes, it is kind of true, but it's a balloon payment in October of 23 of $590,000 on that Pioneer Academy. And there was some equipment in there that also has some additional financing involved with it also. Oh, by the way, that central office building that we have a behavior program in also, it has a balloon payment of $768,000. So what Bryce Wilson, from his perspective, he just sees the notes. He doesn't see how they're structured. Now, I will share with you, balloon payments is a very common structure of financing. And what we've learned through this process is if this override does not pass, we will refinance it with another. I would anticipate we would refinance it with another structure with a balloon payment. And we'll talk more about that later on. So, this presentation is not about the orange part of the circle. Remember, this is the general obligation bond going back to the vote in 2007 for Northside, Hayward, and the high school. What we're here today to talk about is this part of the pie. This is our debt in our general fund operating budget. So here, when I took over, we had over $2.1 million in debt on Pioneer Academy and the central office. Today, that number is approximately 1.1 million. So that's what we've gotten done in the last 6 months. Our tax anticipation note, going back to that all those overages on the building of Northside and the remodel, that was down to 2.448 when I took over. Thanks to the work that Rex File has done, that number is 2.4 million. We were able to put a little down towards that. We also refinanced that, and so we got that at 1% interest. We can only refinance it for 2 years though, and every 2 years we have to refinance it. Tax anticipation notes, by the way, are short-term borrowing, so we're getting to the point where they will no longer let us continue to do tax anticipation notes because it's no longer short-term. So we have to be very cautious right now. But we were able to get that to 2.4, and we have that at 1% interest for the next 2 years. Our short-term borrowing, our line of credit, that number is always changing because it's a line of credit. Today it is 1.925. Remember we had to carry over 1.625 to start the year? We did have to go back and borrow $300,000 more earlier this year. But for the first time since 2014, we did not have to use the line of credit to make our March 1 payroll. Oh, by the way, for the first time in 2 years, we're going to cash flow April and May payroll also. How are we able to do that? I'll share with you here in a little bit, but it's on the backs of our employees. Our employees are working harder with less so that we're making headway on our line of credit and our expenditures. Now remember, we still have that bonded debt of $30 million. And so people look at this and they'll be like, oh, you're $37 million in debt. And that's true. But when we're thinking about an operating budget of what we need to do, I say we are $3.5 million in debt, and we've got to figure this out in our general operating budget, if that makes sense to you. Internally, we are taking care of that line of credit. We have some plans in place to get that addressed. We all know that the state Statute tells us that we can only levy $1.05. We cannot exceed $1.05. In this district, of which $420,000 was going towards principal and interest payments, instead of textbooks, technology, teacher salary, superintendent salary. And I always say that to be very honest about it, because we must be competitive to attract quality candidates. That is very important in education, because it's important to all of us. So we were anticipating on our local budget, on our local debt of the two buildings, a principal payment, and there's our interest payment. Our tax anticipation note, $48,000. We refinanced it. That number is now $30,000. Short-term borrowing, last year on that line of credit, $90,000 in interest alone on the line of credit. This year, we anticipate that being $65,000. Next year, by moving payday, it'll be $55,000. The following year, it'll be a little less, but not a whole lot less than $55,000. But the following year, 3 from now, we anticipate that number in interest to be somewhere around $20,000 to $35,000, which is normal for using a line of credit the way we would need to use that. So, something to think about as we look at projections and what is the district doing. So again, this is just a way for you to see where that money is going. It's the same thing you just saw. And again, those numbers continue to go down because we're in the process of finalizing the sale of Pioneer Academy. So it's important for you to know that when we first started, we kept talking about 5 years, 5 years. Let's fix this in 5 years. So how are we going to figure this out? Because we have $420,000 going in interest and principal. Oh, I haven't even told you yet. We're $500,000 upside down in balancing our budget. Oh, that's why you always have to carry money over to start the next year on your line of credit. Okay? So, doesn't get better. Oh, so then you look at me and you say, so what are you doing? Reduce your expenditures. We've reduced at least $350,000 in services and other things from our budget already. I'll share those with you in a little bit. So in order to write the budget, we look at it as $850,000 a year that we need to somehow figure out a way to flip. Either more money, $850,000, or we need to cut $850,000. Oh, by the way, we also need to get out of debt. To get out of debt in 5 years, it would take $860,000. That's an estimate. That's just a guess, because we do not know what the financing option would be when we started this process. So if you add those up, we've got to flip the budget by $1.7 million a year for 5 years. What's the point? 5-year fix is not realistic. Neither one of those things are going to happen. Where are we at today? We've changed that number to only $3.5 million. Did I tell you that because of the work that we've done and the fact that we're collaborating with multiple financing agents, that we now can consolidate? If we keep central office, they will let us consolidate the tax anticipation note of $2.4 million into one note, and we can get 1% interest for 5 years. It's the first time that we can sit here and say, we know that in 5 years it could be paid off. All our other projections were just projections. Now we know that that is an option. That is great news for this district. Why is that great news? This district has a non-investment credit rating. So even if we chose to run a bond issue, we couldn't. Non-investment credit rating. We're not looking to run a bond issue. But if my children decide to move back to Nebraska City and raise their families, they wouldn't even be able to run a bond issue for their children unless we get this taken care of and start to gain a credit rating so that future generations. So us standing here is actually saying we're trying to set this district up to be successful today, but also for future generations. We now know that it would take somewhere between, we think it'll be 1% interest. We haven't closed yet, we haven't locked that in, but we know it'll be between 7.7 and 8.2 cents on the levy if our valuation stays the same to generate enough money to pay off our debt in 5 years. We now know that. That will get us out of debt, and we'll begin earning a credit rating for future generations. We are improving our internal systems to address all the other needs of our district. So what has the district done? Everybody wants to know, what have you reduced? Reduce expenditures. We've refinanced our general obligation bonds. I've already talked to you about that. That is not part of the $5 general fund, but we've done that. We've sold Pioneer Academy and 2nd Avenue. We're in the process of doing an RFP, request for proposal, for our custodial services. So we're waiting to see what those bids will come back to clean. We have to contract out our custodial services. We've removed central office from that, as well as Pioneer Academy. Well, obviously Pioneer Academy, we're selling it. Central office, we've all agreed at my office, we'll clean it ourselves. We already clean our own offices. I dust it and vacuum it myself. Why does somebody need to come and clean it? We've all sat down as a team and we've talked about who's gonna do the restrooms. And Jenny, our head of building and maintenance, is gonna take care of the front entryway. We have a little plan of how we're gonna take turns cleaning the restrooms that we use. And then the paras and the teacher in the behavior program are gonna take care of the restrooms for us. They're already disinfecting it every day. Because of COVID, we've learned that we're basically cleaning our own places all the time. And so we're gonna take care of that ourselves to try to drive that cost down. We are negotiating every contract we have. Now, this will be something the board's gonna learn at this next board meeting and at the next committee meetings. We now have every contract on a spreadsheet. Something that was not taking place in this district. And we have when they expire, and this sheet is very, well, actually it's 4 sheets, but anyway, we are negotiating every contract. Copiers and printers. We have software subscriptions that we are negotiating. Craig Taylor, our curriculum director, he called 2 companies. We have to keep records on our teachers, right? We have to do evaluations and we have to keep those records. We have a software program that does that for us. We called a company and we said, how much will you do it for us? We called another company, how much will you do it for us? We're gonna end up saving $12,000 by changing companies. Oh, by the way, we're gonna have a completely new login and we're gonna have to learn a whole new way of doing it, but only the administrators use that. So we're all gonna learn something new to save money, okay? We are constantly doing those things. We've canceled software subscriptions that we are not utilizing. We canceled an elementary reading program that was only in 1 building and we were not utilizing to its fullest, so we saved the district $5,000 there. Efficiency of grants, what does that mean? In order for us to get funding, we have to spend it before we get it, okay? They don't just give us money. State aid comes to us in 1 check, but everything else comes in the form of a grant. And so we have to spend it, then we have to turn in our invoices and our billing, and then we get our reimbursement. I come from a district that lays in their money. Remember property valuation divided by students? Well over $1 million, just so you know. They can cash flow an entire school year. Then in the summer, they turn in all of those reimbursements and they get 1 big check and they just do the next school year again. Here, we don't have the money to do that. So our staff meets once and twice a month and we're turning in our reimbursements so that we can get, we're turning in our invoices and our bills so that we can get our reimbursements that month so we don't have to borrow money to pay our bills. How are we able to do the things that we've done already in this short amount of time? On the backs of our employees. We're doing it by working harder with less so that we can save money to provide more opportunities for our students. We offer early separation. That is for veteran teachers so that when they retire, they're more expensive so we can replace them with less experience and cheaper teachers. This year, we did not replace 3 certified teachers. When they left, we did not fill their positions. In 2015 or 16, in that school year, 3 certified teachers were not replaced. Family, consumer science, music, and a behavior teacher. Remember when we went to the location at the central office, we were able to reduce staff. Before they were in multiple buildings. In 17-18, we had 1 certified teacher we did not replace, and we had 3 classified paras that we did not replace. Our maintenance staff is operating with 2 people less than they've traditionally operated, and that will continue. Since I've taken over, since July 1, we've had 5 classified staff leave us. We've only replaced 2 of them. Now our administrators and our staff meet and they talk about what can they do to consolidate. So our paras and our secretaries are working harder because they're doing multiple roles in a building so that we're not spending as much money on salaries. These aren't necessarily cuts, but these are things that we don't do. We do not have a technology replacement cycle. We do not have the money, so our teachers have 9-year-old devices sitting on their desks. Our curriculum adoption cycle, most school districts our size would be spending about $200,000 on curriculum every year. Now, I'm an old chemistry teacher. I didn't want a textbook. I know what the standards are. I know what students are supposed to know because of what the state standards have been identified, and I can create that myself, and I'd rather do it that way. But in a 5th grade classroom where there's 5 different teachers teaching math, it's nice to have a textbook so there's some consistency across it. We have limited those purchases over the last several years to save money. Our HVAC is outdated and it's giving us problems. I always give the description that we're a district in poverty. Reminds me of when I was in college, and when I would get a flat tire or a bad tire on my old Buick Regal, instead of buying a new tire, I'd go to the co-op and just buy another used tire. Well, eventually that catches up, right? With our HVAC, we continue to fix it with Band-Aids and as least as we can do. And that's starting to really hinder us because we're having some serious problems with our HVAC. We don't have the money to address it. Well, then there is the true vehicle story. The vehicles we have are getting high miles. I always tell the story when I went to Hastings Public Schools to visit their superintendent, is I requested a vehicle, and when I got in it, I figured I'd get the nicest vehicle. I'm the superintendent of schools, you know. I'll get the nicest vehicle. I get in the vehicle, 198,000 miles. Now, I'm from Peru State College back when we had very little. I'm extremely proud of my humble background, and I'm proud of that. We don't need fancy vehicles in this district, but we do need dependable and reliable vehicles. And so you just add all these things up, and they continue to be sacrifices that we continue to make. With that said, you need to understand that this community, I have never seen anything like it. I've seen community support schools, but not like this one, all right? So last year when I was taking over and being offered this job, it was just like people were just coming out of the woodworks when we were going into the pandemic closure. And our community foundations, I think it was somewhere around $25,000, somewhere around 200 devices. I would share with you now that our technology replacement plan, we don't have a replacement plan, but we have technology for our students because of our community. Alrighty? We have devices, thanks to our community. Now, I'm concerned about future years, but right now we're good. So thank you. Our state aid has flatlined, and so it falls on our local property tax owners to generate the revenue to support a school. Now that's a whole nother story that we could talk about with regards to how our state funds our schools. Folks, we know that costs are not going to go down. That's not happening. And we have no way to generate additional revenue. We're stuck. We're at the $1.05. Property valuations aren't going up. We're stuck. That's why we're here talking to people now. The solution originally was we were telling people 8 to 10 years. 8 to 10 years. We're going to create new habits. I've told you about some of them. We're going to gain the trust of our community, and we're going to be transparent. We always tell people that in the August board meeting, when we do the budget hearing, the board has told me no one has ever showed up for that board meeting. And then in the September board meeting, when we do the levy hearing, no one in the community has ever showed up. The board has told me, when I got hired, we're changing that. We don't expect anyone to show up, but we're going to go tell everyone. So this is not stopping, folks. We are going to continue to host these in future years so that you know where we're at financially, but in the future, we're going to start talking more about our student success also in these presentations. Okay? So be prepared and please come back. I'm going to remind you of the guiding principles that we need to take care of our budget financial situation. So the plan depends. Some people have looked at me and said, Mark, you've shared a lot of good things that are happening. Why not wait and see what happens? Well, I don't know what's going to happen with property valuations. I don't know what the state's going to do. Follow unicameral. You never know what's going to happen with state aid. We're trying to sell property, but we don't have the cash to wait. We're not afforded the luxury to wait a little while. Otherwise, we're going to have to keep using the line of credit and just keep paying interest. So we need to do something and do it quickly. So we started at 9 cents. Originally, it was 9 cents because we thought that could get us out of debt. Okay? But we didn't know for sure. But 9 cents, we thought would pay off the tax anticipation note and the line of credit, but it would not address the line of credit, our cash flow, or budget shortfalls. The board kind of said that falls on on the school district to take care of, but we need some help taking care of that debt and interest. But we all know that it was bigger than 9 cents. If you want to fix it right now, it's 1.7 million. It's 18 cents a year for the next 5 years. We will manage and reduce expenditures, and the board was trying to drive the pennies down to try to gain the vote. 9, could we do it with 7? Sell Pioneer Academy, now we're at 6.8. Sold the old central office, can we go a little lower? And the board kept wanting to drive, and I get it, drive it down. Don't ask our taxpayers to pay more. Get that number as low as it can go, that can still survive. And I completely agree. Well, but here's what my aha moment was. There was one day that Rex File and I were sitting in my office, and Rex File was dadding me. That's what I call it. He just kept asking me the same question. I do that to my own children. When I know the answer, and I want them to figure it out, and I won't tell them. I remember my dad doing that to me when I was a kid, right? All the time. So Rex was dadding me. He kept asking me the same question, and I was getting a little upset. Couldn't figure it out. He wouldn't tell me. So it's time for me to go get a Diet Dr. Pepper, because it's my drink of choice, that and Diet Pepsi, and I just needed a break. So I took a ride, went and got a Diet Dr. Pepper. Got in my car and I figured it out. And I called Rex. I said, I got it figured out, Rex. What's that? I said, our override election plan. You agree with everything on there, but you now are telling me that in 5 years, then what? He goes, yep, that's right. My next phone call was to Jeff Schneider. Jeff Schneider is the superintendent at Hastings Public Schools. You need to understand that Omaha West Side, Millard West, and Hastings are the only 3 districts that have ran a levy override. Omaha West Side has done 2 back-to-back. They've been successful. Millard has ran 1 successfully. Hastings has ran 1 successfully. Nebraska City Public Schools will be the 4th school in the state to run an override election. So why did I call Jeff Schneider? We used to carpool to graduate school together. Jeff, you passed an override election. What are you going to do in 5 years? Run another one. Now I understand what Rex was telling me. We do not have a long-term solution at Nebraska City Public Schools because of our property valuation, and we're at a $1.05 levy. We need some help. Okay? Now, what do those 4 schools all have in common? Some people wonder, Omaha West Side, Nebraska City, Millard, Nebraska City, Hastings, Nebraska City. We're all stuck in our property valuation growth. Omaha West Side is all the way up against their boundaries. They're not growing in property value, but yet their students continue to come in their doors. Millard is not the suburban Millard we used to know. They are up against their boundaries. They're not growing anymore, but the students continue to come in their doors. They cannot generate more revenue. The old Millard is now Bennington and Elkhorn, and that money is just rolling in because new houses are being built, more property valuation, more tax money. Hastings and Nebraska City, I refer to them as Class B communities. We are not Class B agriculture. Our footprint is not real big to have a huge property valuation base, and we're not growing. And so we're stuck. Hastings and Nebraska City are stuck in generating more revenue. Well, the board was not excited to hear that. They did not want to come back to the community in 5 years. So, then we keep plugging along, making reductions, managing our expenditures, gaining the trust. And what has happened is we will not come back. Unless something real crazy happened, but we are not planning to come back. We simply said, we are going to go for the 9 cents and get out of debt, and we'll be able to take everything else, be able to address all our other concerns. So, that's the plan now. Instead of driving it down and then maybe coming back, we now have a financing option that we know will get us out of debt in 5 years, and that'll take care of it, and the rest we can take care of internally. So there will be a levy override election in May for 9 cents. We sold the academy, so our debt is now lower, so it does not take as many cents to pay it off, and we know that we can get out of debt and start earning a credit rating. On the March 8th board meeting, the resolution was determined. The board took action. And what does that 9 cents mean? We are going to commit those 9 cents to paying off the debt. 9 cents, what does it mean to the taxpayer or the property owner? If you rent, no increase, unless your landlord raises your rent. If you have a homestead exemption, no increase to the cost. If you own a $100,000 home, it'll be an additional $90 a year. If you own a $250,000 home, it'll be an additional $225. If you happen to have a $500,000 home, it'll be an additional $450 a year in taxes, additional. Here in Nebraska City, the median house is $128,600. I just used a nice round figure of $150 so you can do the math. Folks, we are taxing you at $1.24. Remember, $1.05 general fund levy is as much as we can tax. There's a couple of pennies of exemptions that allow us to go over that $1.05 for a QC PUV and the early retirement plan. The state allows that. And then there's the 14 cents that you're paying, the 14.4 cents for the general obligation bonds. That gets you to $1.24. It's hard for me to stand here and tell this to you folks, but it's the truth. That's a high number and I'm not proud of it. You pay, if you have a $150,000 home, you're paying $1,866 a year in property tax that goes directly to the school district. If we passed the 9 cent levy this year, that would have taken it to $1.33, which would take your property tax to $2,001. An additional $135 for you. Okay? No one wants more taxes, neither do I. But folks, we all know the system that the state of Nebraska has created. Public education and property tax, for some reason we act like they're the same thing, and they're not, but that's how this state has created the system. And so who's really paying for education? Ag owners. If you own a quarter section of land, 160 acres, and I spent some time with, again, Christina Smallfoot learning about assessment. If you have tillable acres and it's land value grade, LVG, is 2D, its assessed value is right there, that's an additional $573 a year. Per acre, those of you that know your inputs, I'm not an ag, I understand it, but I don't do it for a living, $3.58 more an acre. Grass, your prairie, your pasture. Oh, I've also learned, by the way, the state now, LVG, it's across the entire state. It used to be regional. So when you compare your pasture here in southeast Nebraska, you're comparing your value of your grass to western Nebraska and the Sandhills. What does that mean? This all went up in southeast Nebraska because there's no such thing as anything other than 1G1, the highest rating of pasture land. Okay, that's what I've learned. Anyway, if you have pasture, it'll be an additional $311 a year. But folks, I'm an ag owner. Okay, we have a family farm. I'm not there making it for a living. Our farm is just a little bit bigger than this. If you're an ag owner and doing it for a living, what is that? 1,000 acres? $3.58 an acre? If you have 1,000 acres, it's going to be $3,000 more. I don't like saying that, but we need to be honest with our community when we talk about it. Here in Nebraska City Public Schools, we're taxing you at $1.24. By the way, that land that I own is in a district. Remember property valuation divided by students? Do you remember me telling you that? Here in Nebraska City, that number is $680,000, one of the lowest in the states. That's why we have to tax you so high. Oh, my land that I own is in a district, when you take property valuation divided by students, 2.6 million. My levy, 78 cents. So you could be, and it's not very far from here, just so you know. So you could be driving and look this way, Nebraska City Public Schools, $1.24. Look this way, another school district, 82 cents. Some people say Nebraska City Public Schools is not efficient, it's a terrible system. Look at the other school district, they have a low levy. And I'll sit here and argue, look at what we're doing for our diverse population and the number of students that we see and the quality that we provide for our students. Okay, it's difficult. And we do watch our spending. We continue to try to sell our property. Obviously 2nd Avenue and Pioneer Academy are gone. We were trying to sell Central Office. It is still for sale, but the price is higher right now because of our potential financing option. After the election, depending on the outcome, the price of that building may change, okay? If it's not successful, I'm sure the price will go down. We are consolidating programs and staff, and we're looking at all ways to generate revenue. And we're going to run a levy override election. Again, Tuesday, May 11th is the election. We were fortunate enough to have Jenny come and join us. Something that's different in our school, in our Board of Education, is that I still guide and advise the board, but we have the actual person come and present. So I went and met with Jenny and I learned, but then she came and told them the truth because I tried to do the best I could. Jenny, I hope you don't mind me putting words in your mouth. But what I heard her say is that Nebraska City Public Schools has over 5,700 registered voters in 15 different precincts. And in order to have an in-person vote, she would have to man all of those precincts. And in Nemaha County, by the way, there's 6 registered voters for 1 precinct. And we'd have to man that with probably 3 people from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. by law. And by the time we're done, the cost would be upwards of $18,000, maybe $20,000 to do all that. But what I also heard her say is, her experience is that a mail-in vote will get more participation. And as her role as a county clerk is to encourage participation. I think that's awesome. So she determined that, not the board. And so there will be a mail-in vote, and you're going to receive your ballot sometime the last week of April, and then they must be back to the courthouse by April 11th, 5 p.m. I believe there's a box that'll sit out there that you can put it in up until 5 p.m. on that day. If the election passes, we will continue to make reductions. I've been very clear with the staff. It's not over if it passes. We need to still make reductions to sustain this for the future. They'll be considerable, but it'll be over time. We'll be able to do it through attrition. We are going to address the line of credit. We're going to pay off our debt in 5 years, and we're going to improve future credit ratings for future generations. If it does not pass, we're going to continue to tax you at a high rate. It's still going to be $1.24, $1.25. We will make a minimal commitment to our debt. We can't afford to put money towards that. So we will continue to kick the can, for lack of a better, I would imagine. We'll continue just to try to push it off as long as we can. I would anticipate if it does not pass, I can't tell you this for sure, but I would anticipate the board would try to run another override election in February of 22. Why? 1 per calendar year, 6 months apart. So May, February. I would anticipate if it does not pass, I would not be giving this presentation. Instead, we would just show you everything that's going to get cut after that election if it fails. Does that make sense? And everybody wants to know what? The board has told me don't waste your time on cuts right now. Just reduce our expenditures, don't worry about cuts. You need to focus on the override election. Thank you. But if it fails in May, then I'll be focusing on these cuts. And everybody wants to know what? And I simply say this. The administrative team already has heard this multiple times. The room will not look the same. Administrators will be one of the first. And that tells you that everything is on the table because it will impact our students. But administrators would have the least impact on students, that's where we would start. We used to think this was an 8 to 10 year process. We now think we can do it in 5 years with the community's help. And we've told you about the things that we're doing and how we're trying to gain your trust and be transparent. And I'm going to remind you that I need to be reminded that our focus is still on students and creating excellence in our district and for each individual student to be successful. So with that, I want to remind you that I'll take any questions, and I'm proud to say that our board president shares his cell phone, that you're welcome to reach out to him, and that's my cell phone also with my email, and that's pretty powerful when your board members are sitting in the room with you and they're willing to answer questions or take your future concerns. So I appreciate you taking the time to join us, and I'll stay and answer questions, or you're welcome to go if you'd like, or does the committee have anything they want to add?